Take your Bibles this morning, please, and let's turn for a moment to the book of Matthew. The book of Matthew and chapter 7. The book of Matthew and chapter 7. Now keep in mind that I call the seminar The Home That God Planned. The Home That God Planned. Now, the home that God planned is absolutely opposite of the one the world planned. You see, you're going to hear a lot of things today that are just opposite of so many things you've heard, because even a lot of the people who are speaking on the home today in Christian circles speak on it from a humanistic view, or it's at least a admixture of Christianity and humanism. A lot of it is nothing more than philosophy or psychology. And when you get right down to just taking the home straight from the Bible, it's a completely different view. And this is the home that God planned. Now, I hope I don't have to tell you today, dear folk, that their plan isn't working. Their plan isn't working. I mean, when you got a 52% divorce rate, something isn't working. And I hope you can recognize that. And when we as a nation, as I said last night, only have 1/16 of the people of the world and produce 50% of the world's divorces, something isn't working. Something needs to be changed. Something needs to be relooked at. And today, we're going to see the home that God planned. Now, I'm going to say something going to make you mad, just sure as I'm standing here. But if you'll stay with me, I'll come back around where it ain't so bad, all right? I was preaching over in the state of New York, and it was in a small town, and they had the church was located right on the town circle. They didn't have a square; they had a circle, and out in the middle of that circle was a big plot of grass, maybe a couple of acres or so, and all the hippies in town hung out on that grass, and they'd lay out there every night on that grass and listen to me preach. Because it was coming out the windows of this church. And so finally, about the third night, I walked out there, and I must have been, I don't know how many of them, 100 or 200 maybe. And I said, look, you're laying out here listening, won't you just come on in? And kind of the leader of the group looked at me, and he said, now, preacher, he said, we believe a lot of what you're saying, but I'm not sure we could take it in there. They said, you just sort of come on like horseradish, and they said, we're not sure we can take it straight, but by the time it's out here and we can kind of roll with it, we can handle it. But, said we have to talk a little bit about what you're saying and sort of come around to it, a little different angle. But this morning, you stay with me, all right? And we'll come back around where it isn't so bad. After I get all through, you'll say, well, I kind of see that now, all right? So just stay with me, okay? And I hope that you'll do that. Now, in Matthew chapter 7, I want you to write down a word, and I want you to hang on to it, and I want you to take everything I say today as foundational. Hang on to that word right there, foundational. I want you to take everything I say today as foundational to your marriage, foundational to any marriage. You see, the greatest thing about this building that we're in this morning is not these walls and not the beams that span across from wall to wall. It's not the fixtures that are very beautiful. It's not any of that. The greatest thing about this building this morning is the foundation. The foundation. This building only stands because of the foundation. You see, I've been over to the Empire State Building. I've been to the John Hancock Building, the Sears Tower. And I've heard people get up there in those top stories and just, oh my, just ooh and ah about the view and how tall the building is and how it sways and all of this, and just go on and on about it. And I've never, in all my travels, I've never heard anybody say, boy, I'd like to see the foundation of this building. They don't even think about it. The foundation isn't pretty, but it's the most necessary thing about the building. It's the most important thing about the building. I've been out in the redwoods and out in the sequoias, and I've heard people, oh my, and they just about get a crick in their neck, leaning back, looking up 300 feet in the air at the top of those giant redwoods. Some of them so big you could build 46 houses out of one tree. Just on, and talk about the beauty and the smell and everything, just wonderful, and never say, boy, I'd like to see the root system. I'd like to see the roots to this tree. Roots aren't pretty. But the only thing that makes that thing stand is the roots. That's how it got so big. That's how it got so tall. That's how it stood for thousands of years, is because of the roots. But nobody wants to see the roots. Nobody even thinks about the roots. You see, it's the foundation that's so important. In Long Beach, California, if you ever go out there, you'll see a hotel that is funny looking because of its design, but it's called the Villa Riviera. And in 1936, when they had the huge earthquake that just leveled everything for miles, I mean, the road had humps in it several feet high, and where it just buckled like this, going down the road like that. And every building was flattened except that one. And when the French architect that designed it built it, he said that building will withstand any earthquake. He put a foundation in that building, unheard of in those days, way back in the 20s. He put a foundation 75 feet in the ground. And he said, you can laugh now, but it'll stand. It'll stand. And it did. It was the only building for miles that took that tremendous earth tremor. And you see, the reason homes are blowing apart, folks, they don't have any foundation. They don't have any foundation. And you've got to have a foundation. Look at Matthew 7 just for a moment in verse 24. Therefore, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man which built his house upon a rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. And everyone that heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them not, shall be likened unto a foolish man, which built his house upon the sand. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. Now notice, first of all, that it doesn't make any difference where your house is built. It gets the same trials. You see, so much of preaching today, so much of teaching today is saying to people who are supposedly Christians that you just become a Christian and everything will be all right. You're not going to have any severe trials, and it'll always be just plenty of money and ha, ha, ha. Well, that just isn't so, folks. Never has been so. It isn't so today. Man, I've been saved for 30 years, and it's been trials almost the whole time. My wife died. My baby died. My wife's been an invalid for 8 years. I've been in 7 major car wrecks. And I mean, it's just one thing after another. But God didn't tell me I wouldn't have trials. He simply said, I won't bail out on you. He said, I'll stay with you. I will not forsake you. I will not leave you. I will go with you through everything that you go through. And He has. And He will. And He will. But you see, notice what we read. It said the house on the rock got the same trials that the house on the sand got. Friend, you are going to have trials. You're going to have trials. They're going to come from four directions. Notice. They're going to come from above. It says, and the rains descended. They're going to come from beneath, and it said the floods ascended. And then it's going to come from the wind. It says, and the wind blew. That's from four directions, north, east, west, and south. You're tried from above, you're tried from below, and you're tried from every side. Now, I've seen a lot of preachers preach on this passage. I've seen chalk artists illustrate it. I've seen artists paint it. And invariably, they'll make a difference in the two houses. Folks, there are no difference in the houses. I defy you. We'll go up here to town, and you drive down the road, and if you can pick out every house that a Christian lives in and every house that the unsaved lives in, I'll eat my words. You can't do it. You can't drive down the street and say, that's a Christian's house, that's an unsaved house. You can't do it. All the houses look alike. There's no difference in the houses. Jesus Christ is not talking about the houses. Christ was a carpenter. He knew what it was to go out. In those days they didn't have subcontractors. And He knew what it was to go out, cut the beams, shave them, get them ready, haul them out, dig the foundation, start the house, build a house. He knew what it was to dig down till you got to something solid. And He had seen others not willing to do that, and they were just built on some kind of a fake foundation, and pretty soon the house collapsed. Let me say to you that, my friend, there's no difference in the houses. He's not talking about the houses. He's talking about what the house is built on. The foundation. The foundation. And the most important thing about your marriage or any marriage is the foundation. It's the foundation. And what the foundation is made of. Now, I want you to consider everything that I say today as foundational. Foundational to your marriage. Number one, turn back to the book of Genesis, please. The book of Genesis and chapter 1. The book of Genesis and chapter 1. Genesis means beginning, and we want to go back to the beginning to get the beginning of the home. Now, the home is the oldest institution God ever made. It's the number one. It's older than the church. It's older than the church. That's why the home is so important. The home is more important than the church is. You say, I don't believe that. Then you don't believe the Bible. It's just that simple. It's just that simple. You see why so many homes are having problems. Your pastor asked me last night, having supper together, he said, why are so many homes blowing apart? I said, because we don't have a foundation. See, we've been taught that if a church is a great soul-winning church, it'll exist. That isn't true. That isn't true. We've been told if churches have great preaching, it'll exist. That isn't true. Churches will only exist because homes exist. There isn't a problem wrong with this church that's not created by the homes in it. You don't have a problem over in this school that doesn't come out of the homes. Brother, let me tell you something. As the home is, so is the church. As the church is, so is the nation. And it all starts back at the home. God instituted the home before He ever did anything else. Anything else. You see, it's interesting to me how people think. If I brought a television set over here and set it on this communion table and played the same thing in this building that you play in your home, you'd run me off. You know I'm telling you the truth. But folks, this building isn't holy. God don't live here. You don't find God when you get here. You either had Him when you leave home or He ain't here when you get here. Let me tell you, walking through those double doors back there won't make you holy. If it would, we just run the whole community through them doors. That's just like climbing a sycamore tree won't save you. That's not why Zacchaeus got saved, because he climbed a sycamore tree. If it did, we'd just get German Shepherd dogs and run everybody up sycamore trees. That ain't it. Now, I'm going to tell you a little secret, all right? If you weren't holy when you left home this morning, you were not holy since you got to this building. They bought the material to build this building, the same place they bought it to build a barn down the street, or to build a saloon over here on the road. This is not a holy building. The other day I got home from preaching and a lady said to me, she said, wrote me a nice long letter and said, I think you're a tremendous preacher, maybe the greatest I've ever heard, but she said, when you got up and started your little commercial about your tapes and books, you lost me. She said, you just desecrated the temple of God. I said, lady, if you'll remember real well, your church meets in a gymnasium. I said, that doesn't happen to be the temple of God where a basketball dribbles up and down the floor all the time and they sell tickets to get in the door. I said, God never has lived in any building on this earth except two. One was the tabernacle and the other was the temple that Solomon built. And I said he hadn't lived in any others. And he didn't really live there. He just put his glory there. And I said he doesn't live in your building or any other building. But you know, we get a little feeling that this is the church. This isn't the church. That's a misnomer. This is the church house. It houses the church. It houses the church. You are the church. The church is built of lively stones, the Bible says, of which Christ is the cornerstone. And Christ doesn't happen to be a dead rock. He's a live rock. You need to understand that. And yet, we will play stuff in our home that if we saw playing here on this community table on TV, it would just send shivers up our spine. Folks, let me tell you something. If you don't have holy homes, you don't have a holy church. It's just that simple. Whatever the homes of this church is, that's what this church is. It can't be any different than that. It can't be any different than that, because coming in this building don't make you godly. You was godly before you got here, or you won't be godly when you get here. And you need to understand that. You need to realize that. You just need to get a hold of that. All right? Just need to get a hold of that. And so this morning, you have to recognize that and realize that we're talking about the foundation. The foundation, all right? The greatest thing there is, the home. All right? And look in the book of Genesis, chapter 1 and verse 4. And God saw the light, that it was good. God saw the light, that it was good. Notice verse 10. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And in verse 12, and God saw that it was good, down in the very last part of the verse. Verse 18, God created the day and the night, and the day to rule, sun to rule by day, and the moon by night, and said, verse 18, that it was good. Down in verse 21, God had created the great whales and every living creature and so forth, and he said, and that was good. Down in verse 25, God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, cattle after his kind, every creeping thing creepeth after his kind, and God said that it was good. In verse 25. And then over in verse 31, and God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. Now, God created all that there was. And every time he finished part of the project, he said, "That's good, that's good, that's good, that's good." 7 times, God said, "That's good." But then, for the first time in Genesis 2 and verse 18, God said, "That's not good. That's not good." And what he was talking about, notice, that the man should be alone. God said, "That's not good that man should be alone." Loneliness is not good. God says it's not good for a man to be alone. And he said, "I'm going to make him a helpmeet." Now, God had created everything. You know, if you didn't know any other way that God created everything, you could tell that just by the order that it's done in. You know, if man would have been creating, then he would have made the whales and then hurry up and made some water so they wouldn't die. But did you see, God made water first so the whale would have something to live in. And man would have made the cow and then said, "Oh my goodness, got to get her something to eat." And hurry up and made some grass so she wouldn't starve to death. And he'd have made the bird and then had to made some air so he could fly through it. You know, but you see God making it in perfect order. He got the garden all ready, then he made the birds to sing in it. Got the grass all ready, then fixed the cow up to eat it, and all the other animals. And then he made the garden and the animals and the sun and everything, got some oxygen and breeze, some water to drink and everything. Then he made man and put him over the garden. And just in perfect order, God made everything. It would take an absolute idiot to believe the story of evolution. I mean, to think that evolution evolved in perfect order, that at first it evolved itself into grass, and then it evolved the bugs to crawl on the grass, then it evolved, the animals to eat the grass, then it evolved man to take care of the animals and so forth, and to take care of it. You know, I mean, you'd have to be idiotic to believe that God did not create. God did create. And then you look at the wonder of all of the animals and their creation and how they're just perfectly matched up and everything. It's just wonderful to see the tremendous creation of God. And God had made all the animals. And then God the Father and God the Son and God the Holy Spirit said, we've made man now in our image and all, and we've made the animals, but they don't have a name. Let's bring all the animals to Adam and see what he'll name them. And whatever he names them, that's what they'll be. And don't you think he did a super job? I look around, he just did a super job. A rat is just a rat. That just has a ring about it, doesn't it? Rat. You can't even sing rat where it sounds pretty. Rat, you just can't do it. There ain't anything pretty about rat. And they're not pretty. They live in the sewer and just eat junk, and corrupt everything they get around. Just a rat, just terrible. And a bat, that just, the old bat, that just has a ring about it, doesn't it? And they're ugly. Boy, they're ugly. They look like a mouse somebody screwed wings on. And in fact, I think that's why Adam called him that. He looked at him and said, "You're not a bird, you're not a rat, I'll just call you a bat." Just perfectly named. And I'm glad he didn't call a house cat an elephant, aren't you? We'd be in trouble, sure enough. But he just perfectly named each thing. God started marching them by in pairs, and he said, "You're Mr. and Miss Bluebird." And they flew up and lit on this limb, up here. And he said, "You're Mr. and Miss Redbird." And they flew up and lit on this limb over here. And then he said, "You're Mr. and Miss Fielark," and they flew out in the meadow and started warbling. And he said, "You're Mr. and Miss Eagle," and they took off for the heavens, diving around. And "You're Mr. and Miss Crow," and they went off cawing at each other. "You're Mr. and Miss Giraffe," and they went off necking. And when giraffes neck, brother, that's necking. They went off together, and the horse and the mare, he said, "You're a horse and you're a mare," and And they went out in the pasture and started whinnying and galloping around. And the bull, he said, "You're a bull and you're a cow." And they walked off together going, they were having a time. And the bumblebees were buzzing, and the chiggers were chiggering, and the fleas were looking for the closest dog. He just named them all. Named them chiggers and fleas and grasshoppers and locusts, and he named everything. He just named everything. As he did, Mr. and Miss Lion went over here and laid down and were licking around on each other. And Mr. and Miss Tiger were over here growling. The hyenas were laughing. The coyotes were howling and the wolves were barking. They were having a time. Just a time together. And each thing had its own. The old lion had the lioness, and the tiger had Miss Tiger, and Mr. Chigger had Miss Chigger, and it was wonderful. The bluebirds were together, and the redbirds were together, and the blackbirds were together, and the field-larks were together, and the goldfinches were together, and the hummingbirds were humming, it was just wonderful. It was wonderful. And as old Adam looked around and saw it all, he just looked like the bottom had fell out. I mean, like the whole world had come to an end. And he was sitting there, and God looked down and he said, "That's not good. That's not good. I'll make him," watch now, "a helpmeet." Now, don't get mad, ladies, okay? This is one of these places where you're going to get mad. But don't. Just hold on, all right? He does not use the word the world uses. He does not use the word that 99% of all Christians use. He does not say, "I'll make him a helpmate." Mate means equal. When you have two mates, they're equal. God never made man's equal. Watch very carefully. God scraped the dust of the ground together and made Adam in his image. Then God put Adam to sleep and took a rib and made woman out of man's image. You see, I'm made in the image of God, and you, dear lady, are made in my image. God has never made man's equal. And you can't take a law and make it equal. And that's a lot of what's wrong today. God said when women rule and children rule, a nation is in trouble. You've got women governors, women mayors, women senators, women federal judges, a woman supreme judge, a woman ran for president, vice president on the last ticket. Let me tell you something, that's one of our problems. I say it as lovingly as I can say it, but God never intended it. God never intended it. God chose 12 apostles and they were all men. God chose 70 and they were all men. My friend, God wrote the Bible and every book was written by man. I just say to you, even the hymnals are called hymns. That's just the way it is. God never made man's equal. You say, well, why didn't he make woman first? Because he didn't want any advice on how to make man. You say, you don't love women. No, I do. My mother was one. But you just have a place. Now hang on. It won't be so bad when I get through. Okay, that's the initial blow right there. God just never made man's equal. He didn't say, I'll make him a helpmate. He said, I'll make him a helpmeet. Now, really, the word means actually completer. Completer. And that ought to thrill your soul, lady. That ought to just put you on the highest plane of ecstasy that you could be on. Is to know that God made you the only thing in the world that can complete His highest creation. That ought to thrill you. That ought to thrill you that you are the complete. That you are the complete. Now, you know, it's a wonderful thing when God made woman. He said, I'll make Adam a helpmeet. And He put Adam into a deep sleep. And by the way, that's where doctors learned to put people to sleep, was from this verse. So that they could operate on them. They learned how to put them into a deep sleep. And it came from this verse here. But you know, God put Adam asleep. And then he took Adam a rib out of Adam's side. And while Adam was asleep, He made woman. And, you know, I'm so glad God's God. You know, if man would have been making woman, He would have just made another man with a few changes. And that wouldn't have been any good, I tell you. But God just sort of redid the whole thing. I'm so glad He did. I'm so glad He did. You know, there isn't anything uglier than one of these women who's been playing with weights. You know, I'm going to tell you that's ugly with a capital U. You know, and when God made woman, He just took the muscles out. I'm so glad He did. You know, I'm so glad He did. I wouldn't want to love my wife and run my hand down her arm, and go ooh, you know, like that, and have my hand just go up and down, you know, feeling of her biceps. And I sure wouldn't want to have to arm wrestle her to see which side of the bed I was going to sleep on every night. You know, I just wouldn't like that. And so God just took out. And besides that, you know, when He made them weak like He did, it makes them think I'm strong. You know, I mean, my wife hands me the jar that she can't open. She says, "You open this," and I said, "Yeah," like that. You know, man, I tell you, I like that. You know, she'll come up, and, you know, do that, and I'll flex, and she, you know, I say, "Yeah," you know. You know, I like that. Amen. You get honest, you like it too, as a man. You know, boy, it's just wonderful. It's just wonderful that way. And you know, I'm so glad God didn't put hair on women's chests. Man alive. I'm glad He took out all that ability to grow hair on their chest when He made woman. I wouldn't want to snuggle up to my wife and tickle my nose, you know, and hair on her chest. And women seem to like it on men. I guess just different, but in fact, I know one. I'm telling you the truth now when I tell you this. I counseled one couple very close to me, and that was the main basis of her divorce, was her husband had no hair on his chest. That's the truth. Now, I'm telling you the truth. That's sad, but that's true. And she found a man with hair on his chest, and that's who she's married to today. But you know. I'm glad God reversed that when He come to women. I just wouldn't like that, I tell you. And you know, I'm so glad. I'm telling you, I've been thankful for this, that if one of us had to go bald-headed, I'm glad God let it be the man. You know, wow. I tell you, it'd take all the grace that I have to love a bald-headed wife. Now that's, you know, I mean, I just admit that openly. It really would. I just wouldn't like that at all. You know, you know, I'm just thankful for that. You know, I've heard about every bald-headed joke there is, and I'm glad it's about me, not about my wife. You know, one fellow told me the other day, he said, "Brother Williams, you ever use alum on your head?" And I said, "No." "Will alum grow hair?" He said, "No, but it'll shrink your head to fit what hair you have." You know. I haven't tried it, but it might be worth it. You know, and did you ever notice? Did you ever notice in the animal kingdom that just about in every part of the animal kingdom that the male is the most beautiful, the most, you know, handsome, just, you know, I hunt a lot. And I've been with a lot of hunters, and I've never had a guy say, "Come on in, brother, come in, I want to show you the doe I shot." You know, and never. I mean, just never. You know, or Come on in, I want to show you the cow moose I shot, or the cow elk that I shot. No, it's always the male. Big antlers, And that's a wonderful part of God's creation right there. Everything that has antlers sheds them every year. Everything that has horns does not shed every year. Cow doesn't shed her horns, bull doesn't shed his horns, a goat doesn't shed his horns, a sheep doesn't shed his horns. But a deer, an elk, a moose, all have antlers and they all shed every year. You know why? Because that's the salt that the little creatures eat. That's why you don't walk out here in the woods and find deer horns and everything laying everywhere. It's because the skunks and the raccoons and the possums and the badgers and all of them, the porcupines, that's their salt. They eat those for their salt. Isn't God wonderful? He just figured it all out, so wonderful. But I know. Every place I speak, somebody comes up and says, "Oh, you one of them men hunt them poor little deer," and all the hippies, they jump on me about it, and everything. I say, "Yeah, just go ahead and jump, hippie. Those shoes you got on is dead cowhide. That hamburger you guzzled down in McDonald's was a dead cow. Why'd you eat it for? You oughtn't to eat things like that. You oughtn't to eat them poor old cows. You ought to let them live." Well, anyway. Take the duck for instance. The male duck is always so beautiful, and the old hen just the elk cow, not being just ugly, then the cow, in the moose is ugly. Well, in fact, all moose are ugly, but the horns help offset the male moose, the old bull. But you take the pheasant. The cock is so pretty, and the old hen just it's just that way. It's just that way. And the stud has the big, thick neck, and he's the one that prances around the pasture. And the old bull is so majestic and all, and just that way. But when God made man and woman, He reversed that, and the woman is so much prettier, and so much sweeter, and so much nicer to look upon, and long hair, and God says shame for a man to have long hair, but it says a woman's hair is her glory. It's her beauty. It's her covering, and they have such pretty long hair, and oh my, it's just wonderful, just wonderful, one woman said to me, she said, "Brother Williams, why didn't my husband ever say anything sweet to me?" I said, "Turn around, let me see." So she turned around, and I said, "Well, your hair's too short, that's the reason." I said, when a man says sweet things to his wife, he likes to run his fingers through her hair and say, "Oh, my darling, oh, my darling." I said, in your case, lady, it's just, "Oh, my, oh, my." And then he's out of hair. But God gave woman the ability to grow long, beautiful hair. And by the way, women, if you can't grow long hair, I'll tell you how. Okay, it's real simple. Just take vitamin E. Vitamin E will make your hair grow long and healthy. My wife used to wear hair down to her waist before she got sick. She couldn't grow long hair either. Just down about her neck, her shoulders, and that's it. Just end split, wouldn't grow, and got her on vitamin E, and man, zoop, down it went. Well, it wasn't quite that fast, but it went down. God made woman so pretty, so pretty. There's two times that I would have liked to have lived. One is when Christ was born. I'd have liked to have been there the night He was born. What a thrill. What a thrill to hear the angels announce His birth and to see God wrapped in human flesh, lying in the form of a little tiny baby. That must have been precious. And then the other time I'd have liked to live is when Adam woke up. I tell you, whew, man, I imagine he tore up 2 or 3 acres of the garden. Yeah, he woke up and there Eve stood, my soul. Wow. I mean, here's the most beautiful woman that ever lived. I mean, her eyes are perfectly set. I mean, her hair is the right length and the right color. And she wasn't white, she was red. God didn't make a white man, he made a red man. That's what Adam means, is red. And she had that perfectly toned skin. Of course, there wasn't a blemish in it. And her fingers were the right length. Her nails were perfect. Just everything. Her nose was perfect. I mean, my. And there she stood in all of her beauty. And old Adam, I just see him. He just sort of walked around her a few times, just looking. I can just hear him saying, "Lord, what have you done?" You know, I believe he said those same words. You know, what hath God wrought? You know, my soul. And he just looked, and then I see him. He comes up, you know, and he takes her in his arms, and he squeezes her to his big old chest, and looks over his shoulder, and there's the lions laying over there, and he just sticks his tongue out at them like that, you know, and says, "Now I got me one." You know, just growl all you want to and lick around all you want to over there. And here was woman, and God had made her so beautiful and so precious. The completer. The completer. Now Adam in love. Now Adam's happy. Now Adam's thrilled. Now he's complete. Did you ever put a 500-piece puzzle together and get it all together and there's one piece missing? Boy, isn't a 500-piece puzzle with one piece gone ugly? And you stand there and look at it, and invariably it's the piece right in the middle. And about that time, some smart-aleck family member comes along, reaches in his pocket and says, "Y'all looking for this?" Y'all put that together gradually, you know, and now he's going to be the hero. And he comes over and goes, and it's all beautiful. Now the picture's complete. The trees are there, and the barn's there, and the horses. It's just all complete, and it's beautiful. And dear lady, that's what God made you. He made you the complete. You are the 500th piece of the puzzle. No man, I don't care what his name is, can be complete without a woman. God said, "He that findeth a wife findeth a good thing." A good thing. And lady, that ought to thrill you. That ought to thrill you that God made you the completer. Now we call that session the Helpmeet. Now I'd like for you to consider the second session with me, please. And that session we will call One Flesh.